Hey, this is John Modern, and today we will be talking about the 2023 Nomad V6. I'll kind of go over geometry, build, what I did for the build. This is actually a custom build, and then jump into how it rides. So this is an extra large frame. It is the CC edition, so the higher end carbon, a little bit lighter weight. And at the time, XO1 builds weren't available, so my local shop and I put together what is almost an XO1 build, but with some of the custom bits that I would bring on to any bike. So we've got an XO1 transmission here. We've got the RockShox Super Deluxe coil with the hydraulic bottom out. Bike yoke dropper, that's a different piece than that would come stock. And we've got the Santa Cruz Reserve HD 30s. Maxxis Minion DHR double down in the rear. XO Plus Assegai in the front. And yeah, I carry TRP brakes. Thank you, TRP. I am not sponsored by TRP, but I am just thanking them for creating the DHR Evos. These brakes freaking rule. They're the brakes I put on every bike. So running those brakes, secret weapon here, the Sensus Meaty Paws. If you haven't tried these out, they're 35 millimeters in diameter, and they're just the biggest, gnarliest, best grips ever. You definitely need a little bit bigger of a hand. I'm not like a huge guy, somewhere between large and XL on bikes. But I really, really appreciate these grips and ride them gloveless. They're very comfortable gloveless, and yeah, those are my preferences. Kind of in line with all the other Santa Cruzes. For an XL, this one's running 495 mil reach, which again, as a guy who's 6'1", kind of in between large and extra large, really, really like that reach, very comfortable for me, which is kind of why I gravitate towards this brand, and honestly brands with shorter reaches in general on their XL bikes. It has a 63.8 degree head tube angle, slightly longer chain stays than is popular right now. It's 446 mil chain stays. Yeah, that all kind of adds up in a 77.8 degree C-tube angle. Those, you know, that's a limited scope at the geometry, but it all adds up to a very centered ride, a very balanced ride. I really like that they didn't go with super, super short chain stays like some brands, because it kind of adds to the stability, but it's still really maneuverable. This is a mullet bike, so we've got a 27.5 rear. The front triangle is actually the same as the Santa Cruz Megatower. So they share a lot of things, but they also differ in a lot of ways, and we'll talk about that shortly. Yeah, so we'll kind of jump into climbing. This is a big bike. This is a 36.5 pound bike. We all kind of had fun guessing the weight and doing the little lift up test at the shop, and I actually was closest. 36.5 pounds this bike came in at, and I don't know, I kind of love heavy bikes these days. You know, we don't have a lot of flat trails here in the Front Range of Colorado. Mostly what we're doing is climbing for an hour and coming downhill in 15 to 20 minutes, and that's your ride. You can certainly find bigger rides, but on average, the rides that we have time for, or I have time for rather, are about an hour, hour and a half, and it's just a long, sluggish climb with a really fun, sustained downhill. And on those climbs, like this geometry of these new bikes, 77.8 degree C-tube angle, you're so upright and centered climbing for that long that, I don't know, personally, I don't mind the weight. This version of VPP isn't the most energetic when putting down the power, but it definitely rewards the kind of rider that just wants to sit, spin, think about something else, and get up the climb. I will say though, and I said this for the Megatower, and it applies here, the geometry is too big to fail, almost. Yeah, so I mean, you can still, I've still gotten up super technical ascents that some might only attempt on their kind of cross-country or trail bike, because the geometry really kind of gets your weight forward on those climbs. I'm not shying away from some of those ascents. So, you know, I really like it. I wouldn't say that it's, you know, I'm getting any PRs on the climb. Never expected that from a 36.5 pound bike, but it is getting me up the hill just fine. And again, I think it would bother me more if we had a lot of like meandering trails where you're kind of climbing and then there's a quick descent and then climbing, and your climb is a little more like that instead of just sustained hour climb. In that situation, I might be a little bit more critical. Descending though, descending on this bike is just a dream. I really was a big fan of the Megatower, and I'm just gonna compare it right now. So the Megatower and this bike share the front triangle. Like I said, they have the same version of VPP linkage. So there's a lot of things that are just so similar. It's hard not to look at them through almost the same lens. Everything the Megatower did well, this bike does well in pretty much the same way. I'd say the Megatower might hold a little bit more speed on a straight, really chunky line because it's full 29er. And those wheels are just gonna roll a little bit faster. So the only situation personally where I'm kind of choosing the Megatower over this bike these days is if I'm going on a trip to Moab and I'm coming down the whole enchilada 2 or 3 times, and you know, those are just long, straight, very straight desert, chunky descents. And they're awesome, and I think the Megatower is just slightly more suited to that. That is a small kind of check for the Megatower. Where this one excels is that it turns so much better. I love how the Megatower, you know, took on technical terrain, how it climbed, how fast it was and how jumpy and playful it was off of little features. This bike does all that without sacrificing kind of the maneuverability, especially in the tight switchbacks. We have a lot of descents here that in the front range that I really love, and they're very tight switchbacks. The Megatower took so much input on those that it was kind of exhausting. Not the end of the world. You get used to it, you adjust, you adapt. I think, you know, the longer we ride a bike, the more we adapt to it, and the less these nuances become, I don't know, kind of negatives, because we do overcome them as riders. But just picking up these bikes and going out to ride, those are kind of the differences. And I took this bike up to Hard Money Trail at Maryland Mountain, and that's a trail that has a lot of those tighter switchbacks that I'm talking about. And it just didn't shy away from turning quickly, but it also didn't do that thing that some mullet bikes do, which is kind of oversteer. I was on the Santa Cruz 5010 for a little while, and I really didn't like how it would oversteer. You would really start to pick a direction, and that bike would send it over, and I could never really compensate for that. This is also 650 rear, so mullet setup, but you just don't, I don't know, it's more intuitive, it feels more natural. Everything about this bike just feels like an extension of yourself. And to me, that's the highest compliment a bike can get. You just don't really have to think about what you're doing. I don't have to make a ton of adjustments. It just kind of feels like a part of me. And yeah, if you can't tell, I freaking love this bike. So big props to Santa Cruz for this. I think that they really struck gold on this one, and I hope that they don't ever change it. I just hope they make this bike until I'm too old to be riding bikes, because I probably will be. So yeah, set some PRs downhilling on it. Excited to take it to some gnarlier terrain up at the bike park. Haven't done that yet, but just from the riding I've done here in the front range, I'm guessing it's going to excel there as well. Comparisons, you know, obviously you just heard me compare it to the Megatower a bunch. That's the easiest bike to compare this to. But I would also, you know, other big bikes I've been on recently, the Firebird. I would choose this bike over the Firebird in every situation except for longer high country rides. If these two bikes were in the stable at the same time and I was going to do 25 miles way up in the Rockies somewhere, I would definitely pick the Firebird first. It's just a better pedaler. It's more of an all mountain style bike than this bike. But that said, if I had a trail bike, I would pick that over both. So I'm not sure it's a, you know, fair comparison, but if you wanted one bike and you do a lot of high country riding, or you have more meandering trails and you don't always, you know, need the big bike, I'd say Firebird over this. This is faster everywhere else, you know, longer sustained descents. I like how it absorbs trail chatter better. I like how it maneuvers better. I like how it does everything better except for maybe climb and flat trails while under power. Again, we just don't have a ton of that around here. So that's kind of how it compares against the Firebird. I was also on the nuke-proof Mega 29C for a while. And that bike, for a full 29er bike with lots of suspension, can really take on trail chatter really well, is full 29, but also can maneuver really well. And I think that has something to do with the stack height. I didn't really dive into the numbers on the nuke proof, but the nuke proof is very intuitive to maneuver as well. It doesn't take as much input as some bigger bikes. Very intuitive to ride. It's just not that fun. It's not that poppy. I like to have fun on my bike. It's not always about going as fast as I can go. You know, if I was racing enduro, sure, I'd probably go nuke proof, but I don't know. That's not really what mountain biking is to me. It's not all about racing and going as fast as I can all the time. Most of the time we're just out there, you know, screwing about with our friends and trying to jump off rocks and do dumb stuff. And I'd rather do that on this bike. So that's kind of how it compares to the nuke proof. And then, yeah, the Megatower, I would probably kind of compare it to more like, yeah, if I had to choose between the two, I'd take the Megatower if it was like a bigger all-day ride where I was pedaling a lot more. It's slightly better pedaler, slightly better climber. But again, those benefits on the climbs and on, you know, pedaling under power on the flats are outweighed, in my opinion, by how this bike handles pretty much everything else and descending. So yeah, who's this bike for? I think you need to have big terrain, not necessarily, and I don't want to scare people like, oh, you have to, you know, live in Squamish for this bike or be next to Whistler, because I don't think that's the case. I just think you need sustained descents. I don't think you want to get stuck on flat trails for too long. It probably wouldn't be that much fun. But I also don't think folks are confusing this for a bike that's going to be a lot of fun in a flat, you know, area. I think you just, you know, need bigger climbs, bigger sustained descents, and this thing's going to come to life whether or not that trail is super technical, flow trail, jump line. It can kind of handle it all, and you'd have fun. It doesn't. That's another thing. It doesn't have to be a super chunky trail to have fun, which I think is great because it is a big bike. It's 170 mil in the front, 170 mil in the rear with a coil, 36.5 pounds. You know, you know what this bike is after, but it doesn't always ride like a big bike. And I think that's a big thing that I want the audience to take away, is that yes, you can have fun on flow trails, but you can also attack some of the chunkier, gnarlier terrain in your area. So right now, for me, as far as big bikes go, this is the bar. This is the bike to beat. I'm excited to try some other stuff that's coming out soon as well. But until I can get my hands on that stuff, I am going to be very happy riding this all over Colorado, Utah, if I can get there this fall. And yeah, that's about it. Again, still pretty new at this bike review thing. So like, subscribe, do all that fun stuff if you like. But if you have any comments or questions, drop them down below. I'm very good about getting back to people. There's probably a lot of stuff I missed in this review. I'm pretty excited about this bike, as you can tell, but would love to engage with you guys and kind of answer any questions you might have. So that's it.